Hi, I'm Kate.
And I'm Mandy, and this is Love Sober,
the podcast for the sober and sober curious.
Hi there, welcome back to Love Sober, the podcast for the sober and sober curious. And it's Kate and I again this week. And we're just going to have a general chit chat around the subject of being in a caring role, being, for us, it's motherhood and aging parents now, which are taking more of a level. But it's just a kind of a nod and a kind of delve into how that plays into our drinking stories, and also kind of how we can play it down. That we have a tendency to gaslight ourselves around how much of a mental load caring for others is, and the importance to really recognize that in your own story, and and recognize that does have an impact on how you drink. Potentially, if you're listening to this podcast, then the answer is probably yes. So it's just kind of important to talk about that, really, and where we're at with it, and just generally checking in. So how are you doing, Kate?
Oh, hello. How am I doing? Well,
Easter hollybobs.
Yeah, Easter holidays. So I'm a mix of, I'm sort of a bit up and down. Got a little bit tired today. And we've decided to have the chat today about this because of, partly because of something that happened with, in my family. And I've got teenagers and various struggles and with mental health, and I've been on here before, haven't I, talking quite openly about my with CAMS and stuff like that, and it's just a lot, there's just a lot. And so I'm that mix, as we so often are, of just like this cloudy and a bit sunny, chance of rain, hopefully not too many storms on the horizon, having had a storm just passed, and I'm sort of in it. So I'm all right. I'm a little bit reflective and I'm processing. And I'm also just kind of happy that the clocks went forward and holding on to the small things, really. How about you?
I'm good, which is, we were talking about this before we started the chat, which is kind of, I don't know, just sometimes how your mental health can go is really surprising. And I really felt like yesterday, I was just that feeling of like hold on, I was thinking of the K Tempest poem, like Hold Your Own, which is beautiful. Like, look it up if you've never listened to it. Because Monday I was in a mental health rock bottom, like properly could not see a way out, like spent most of the day in tears. I spent most of last weekend in bed. I had a lot of anger towards myself about being so fatigued again. Like, it was bad. I was really like, at my wit's end with my tiredness, and just like ached all over, and I just felt like there was no way out of it. And now I'm okay. I'm actually quite chirpy. So it's like, what? It's like 2 days later or whatever, to have such a kind of dramatic turnaround. So I'm kind of trying to unpick it. I mean, I know I did do emergency sort of self-care. Like I saw my, alternative therapist and cried a lot with her, and she talked me through a lot of kind of concepts. She was using the metaphor of being in a riptide, which there are a lot around where I live. So and the fact that if you're battling against it, you're going to drown, and you need to just like you need to accept it, lie back and float, and let the tide bring you back in. And I tend, I have a tendency to get, I was in like battle mode against myself, like just so angry with myself, like felt like a burden, felt like I couldn't do anything right, can't do any sport, I can't do any, all I did was sleep all weekend, I wasn't there for the kids, and so sort of had that chat of, the recognition, just like I am a sensitive person, and I am very, my endocrine, because she's a shiatsu master, my endocrine system is incredibly sensitive. I get knocked by the weather changes, by emotional changes, or sleep, so there is that kind of acceptance of putting my own, just taking 2 days and just being like, you're not very well, Mandy, and not being angry about it. So anyway, and then I went to yoga, and then I was all right, really. Thank goodness, because I think it was about 2 weeks like of a downward spiral, I guess. So yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, and you just reminded me of the fact that I was dodgy last week, wasn't I? And I actually
really
went to
dodgy.
bed for a day or so. Yeah, I did. Like, when you said about the endocrine system, and obviously a thing that's very relevant to me right now, and I'm really interested in it, is that kind of the menopause, the perimenopause, that hormonal, the endocrine system. And I'm sure we will like dive into that properly over the next year or so, but we are talking about that, and we're talking about all the stuff that impacts us as women, aren't we? And that is such a big, that is such a place where we gaslight ourselves and get gaslit in terms of having to be in bodies that perform like men in this kind of linear 24/7. We've talked about this before, work, productivity, and our bodies, our minds, our spirits, they don't work like that. And knowledge is power is with that, isn't it? It's that we can plan around. Hopefully we have some give and some slack, and how can we design our lives so that we can build that in to respect that a bit more,
it's difficult, isn't it?
It's really difficult.
Because it goes into that, I want to be taken seriously in the world, like I want to be able to have my voice, have my say. I'm a feminist, like I've fought so long to
have a seat at the table,
not to be seen as weak or as less than.
But then now seen as the same as, and that's where is, if you're not the same but equal, and that's where we're still, because if otherwise it's not an equal playing field, and then we won't, and then we'll get angry with ourselves when we have to quite reasonably take any kind of stock of the situation, which is definitely where I was. And it's really interesting that anger can become when that you internalize that anger, like you're not good enough, it's just like there's something wrong with you, rather than sort of just being like the acceptance of this is who I am. I'm prone to adrenal fatigue, like just and it is what it is, like. Well, we were talking about this, like, so we'll dive into this straight away, but we were talking about that book that Tiffany North recommended when we've got the podcast next week with her as an intuitive eating coach, and she mentioned the book The Body Is Not an Apology, and it really got, and it keeps repeating this like a mantra, and it's like it's really sat with me, and it's starting to diffuse and instill within me, like in that embodied way of like, man, how we politicize bodies, how we are mean to bodies, how we criticize bodies. And it's like this ableist stuff. It's like, who the fuck said that we should go along our lives and expect ourselves never to be poorly, never to be ill, never to have endocrine fatigue, never? It's like that's bonkers. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Of course we're going to, but it's almost like as soon as anything there's a need that arises, there's a take our foot off the kind of productivity, then it gets pathologized, and it's like, I need a break. We need a break.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm on my period.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, I am. I'm bleeding. Yeah, that's what's going on this week. So no, I won't be doing that. And it's like, why? It's just ridiculous, and I think the same for men taking mental health days when they're exhausted. It's the same. It's
and again, we were talking about this before, isn't it? It's like that ultimate productivity, otherwise you are declassed in some way, so if you are a child, you're not listened to. If you're an old person, you're not listened to. If you're a woman, you're not listened to, because it's all essentially about keeping the productive kind of wheels in motion, which is just it's just not working essentially. As a way to work with animals that we're all animals, with animal systems. So on that that line, I mean, this came out of our conversations about the mental load of motherhood, and something that really touched me that you said earlier was, the kind of the constant battle of being a parent, between heart and head, and between the grief of letting them go and the understanding of their need to be independent.
So walking the line, always walking that tightrope. That's what it feels like to me. That it's like, I want to protect you, and I have to let you go, or step by step by step by step. Every day there'll be something, and that. I think what led into that was obviously what had happened with us last night, and and I feel very much like that sort of information overload that I felt this year of the news, the 24-hour news cycle, and how so many people have just gone, oh my God, we're just getting through COVID and now we've got a war, and that sort of the global impact. And it got me to thinking about us as social animals, us as nervous systems. How on earth are we supposed to parent and stay well as moms in our sort of mammalian way and walk that line of letting our kids go when we have all this information? We have too much kind of information overload, and it's like, how are we ever going to relax? It feels like that. It's like, and so, getting, I think what we were coming onto and what we wanted to speak about is to try and, do that gatekeeping, do that oxygen mask for ourselves, work out what's need to know intel. It almost just bring a bit of awareness to that, because that will play into our feelings of overwhelm, worry, catastrophization, send us into kind of fight, flight. And so, it's that. It's, I think so much again goes back to that. How do I carve out some safe space for myself to be calm enough to trust myself, to trust my parenting, to trust my kids when we have all this information? And I don't know but I know from other women that I've known for years on sober forums, we tend to be on the worrying end, the activated end, the stressed end already, which is often why we were drinking, to kind of not blur those edges, to make the world copable with, and to soothe ourselves, and using it in that faulty way.
It's interesting because it's almost like, because of the way that the modern world is, like we can, it's very coming back to this idea of acceptance. It's very difficult, even more difficult, to have acceptance over your role as a parent, because of you can see so much. I was just thinking about when I was saying to my kids the other day, actually, when I was a kid, like, I'd just go off on my bike or whatever, like, that's why, because we're talking about how nothing was open on Sundays and it was so boring. And I just go off at, like, when I was like 14 or whatever, go off about 10 in the morning, and I come back at like I don't know, like when I was hungry, basically about 7,
Yeah.
you know, and my parents had literally no idea where I was or what I was doing, because there was no mobile phones, there was no way that they could be in contact with me. So you're kind of forced into acceptance of the limitations of your role as a parent, aren't you? Because there's no other way. So it's almost like when you it's that kind of that powerlessness, or that, you know, acceptance of it is what it is, because you've realized that there are no other kind of options. Whereas now it's just like, you know, you can have trackers on your kids, which I don't, you know, but there are so many more options around how you're supposed to interact, which makes it really confusing and really hard to kind of let go and allow what will be.
That's really interesting though, what you just said about, because I was thinking about, you know, something came up on a group today about WhatsApp chats, toxic WhatsApp chats with teenage groups, right? And so I've done a lot about trying to help the children to use their tech appropriately. And actually, though, I've never really thought about that in terms of how we then connect with our children through tech and what's appropriate. So that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, because it doesn't allow for that. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like developmental stages that they need to go through in terms of making mistakes, getting in trouble, you know, not like not knowing where they are, or, you know, needing to kind of like all those things of like trying to find a phone box, you know, to like say, like, because you had specific, you know, for me, I had to phone at a specific time, so at least I had to phone, you know, I had to be somewhere to phone in, you know, and just the boundaries are so kind of meshed and mixed up, and how much you can look in on their lives on Instagram, and, you know, how much you can kind of it's really messy, and I think it becomes really messy in terms of your roles as well, because there's that friendship, then parenting, that kind of, you know, how much you should know is really kind of messed up, I think, at the moment. And also there's a sense of closeness when perhaps you shouldn't, you know. And also in terms of the amount of knowledge we have around kind of mental health, addictions, behavior, that load, that load.
I feel a real load around that, because obviously our, you know, what we do as coaches, what we do as professionals, my own experience of that, I know that's definitely almost, and Google, right? I think it affects people generally like that. It's like, okay, I should be able to fix this because I can basically Google it, which is an amazing resource, but it doesn't put a lot of pressure on the individual. It's like, especially if we've got that messaging as mums, we should be able to fix, we should be able to you know, safeguard our kids. Okay, we've got that letting go bit over the teenage years, which is always messy, oh god, you know. But there's that feels like it gets put back on the individual, and then by getting put back on the individual, if it's a parenting capacity, it generally is going to be put back on moms. And what a load that is, you know.
I think it is, because we're in again, it's sort of into productivity, isn't it? It's like we should be able to fix this, you know,
turn out perfectly well-rounded human beings who can take their place in society, be productive, shiny, and you know, slim, not too slim, you know, fit, all the rest of it, all the body stuff is going
body confident,
body confident,
whatever that looks like. I think something that I've had to really reckon with is who, like in parenting, like questions to ask myself is like, who is this about? Like, if, for example, I'll take an example which isn't, you know, something that's going on in my family, but if your child is failing at school, how much of, when you are worrying about it and when you're getting into a narrative about it and you're spending your time, it's like, how much is that about you and how you want to be perceived as a mum, and how much is that is genuine and kind of worry, genuine feelings, is it care, or is it reactionary to the perception of you as a parent? And that's something like I have to ask myself, like, is this coming from a like, I don't want them to fail because I want them to be able to go to university or whatever, like, is that genuinely true? Or is it because I want people to think I've done my job well as a mum, and my kid is then doing well in their life? Because I think it's important to have those honest questions with yourself in order to be able to go, actually, this is it, it's not coming from the place which I make the pretense it does. And there's no shame there. It's just having awareness and then being able to be like, okay, so actually, what do I want to do with it that will support that child and their own goals?
It's taking the pressure off, isn't it?
Yeah.
Taking
it's like
the
they don't care about about getting good grades, and then it's just like, well, that's on them, isn't it? Because it's their life, it's not mine. But that's something certainly I have to like check the dialogue. It's like, what is this about, you know? Like,
and I think it comes from fear as well, that it comes from like really wanting the best for them, wanting to do a good job, not fucking it up, all of that. I mean, it's such a backwards forwards facing, you know, myriad of kind of messaging, isn't it, that comes onto us. I just find it the most extraordinary journey. And like, gosh, so hard sometimes, so hard. I was going to say something, because one of the things we talked about earlier was like, then this feeling like the nuclear family is too small, and this is not like new rocket science or anything. It's been like, I remember reading about this in sociology back in 1985, you know, like that this, you know, when we're looking at family systems and what is healthy, and, you know, just different ways different societies do it, but there's this like need for, we were talking about that kind of feeling of need for support, wider support and wider family networks. And I know that's something that I feel really pertinently, is that feeling of, you know, we talked about this before, and I made some joke like really early in the podcast, and then felt really vulnerable about it taking a village to raise a child, and it ours just looked like social services was our village, right? And actually, I don't have any shame about that anymore. I'm like, of course that was appropriate. There was no other support. So of course we had to have some help from, you know, the educational system, and bloody hell, wasn't that this really hard work even getting that in place?
And so it should be.
And
I mean, it's,
you
like,
know, of course there should be. We're supposed to be a civilized society, whatever that looks like, caring. I mean, it's not, is it, at all? But, you know, of course we need that. And I really feel really, really strongly that parents who go through a similar thing to me, I know the shame of that. I know how you can sit in that, especially because often you get to that crisis point and you don't know what's going on, and you don't know the system, and people really assume knowledge as well. They talk to you, they'll go, well, you need an EHCP, and you're like, what the hell is an ECP? You know, what is that? You have to learn how to talk to social workers, because they are within these work cultures and they have codes and languages with each other. And I know what it's like to sit in that boardroom in a school with a whole multi-agency support in inverted commas team around you. I feel so shamed by a social worker who is about 12 and who really seems to love the smell of farts on that particular occasion, because it's a bit of power. Like literally, you have honestly like no idea. Like, well, you know, you might have some idea, but it's really, really tough for people. And so I really wanted to call that out and just say that, because, you know, we need supports, and we need, systems of support around us, and wider networks and a broader base, you know.
And I guess that's the kind of the message, isn't it, around, you know, drinking, and around sort of what went on for us. You know, interestingly, like neither of us have, so where you have some extended, you had a relationship with your aunt, didn't you, and had some, but you know, obviously didn't have a relationship with your dad. And so like broken family systems, if you're talking at like a wider sense, you know. And I like, I mean, there's no one like, I don't have any cousins, I don't have any aunts, I don't have anyone else other than mum and dad and one grandparent growing up, who didn't live close by and was complex person. And so you know, you go into survival state in terms of like being ultra independent, or you know, seeking out codependent relationships, or you know, it gets messy in terms of how you structure and how you survive. I'll speak from my own experience, and this touches on what we were talking about last week. And so when you're in survival state, you know, you're constantly in kind of high alert, and your thinking gets very narrow. And I was incredibly, and I still struggle to ask for help. Like I still struggle to put my hands up and say, I need someone to step in now. And so when you're in that sort of state, and when you're being sold this kind of message of alcohol being a helper and being a treat and being something that you can rely on, and you know that it can, that it, you know, that it's something that gives you joy or whatever, you know, it's very easy to kind of fall into that relationship with alcohol, because you like, it was like me against the world. That's what it was like. It was me against the world. No one understood. I couldn't tell anyone, because then I'd be failing. I couldn't possibly like fess up and say that it was all too much. I was, you know, completely gaslighting how tired I was, how stressed I was, how worried I was. You know, I was living in another country, didn't have any support. And you know, and wine was the solution that was socially accepted. So, you know, part of why we wanted to talk about this today was just so you listening can go, right, like this, this is something, right? It is something to be, you know, a parent or a carer in modern society. And that, you know, that's a reason why maybe drinking has become problematic for you, and that's okay. But you can do something about it. You know, it's permission to stop, isn't it? Like often people are looking for, well, like I can't possibly give up because I'm not that bad, or you know, I haven't had major trauma or whatever. It's like all of this is trauma.
And it's that you know, something you said to me before like really resonated with me about my messaging, and was that, you know, you've got to appear normal, don't let anyone see that you're struggling. Don't let people see your, you know, dirty washing, whatever, that kind of, you know, keeping up appearances was massive in my family. Really toxic, really toxic. And there is, and part of that feeding into that wine thing is there's that, you know, we don't want to, you know, it's bad to then say, okay, I'm struggling with this, because we're also trying to keep up with those appearances. And you know, and also it's like we don't, you know, to try and convince ourselves that we are coping, because to not cope is so shameful. We're made to feel so ashamed of that. And like you say, that's where we, you know, we end up gaslighting, playing things down, trying to cope, and all of those other stuff. And I did have a really great salient point which I've forgotten, which is so often the case with me. But it's about that, like, you know, sharing and you know, I guess why we do the podcast, right, why we ever started the podcast was, let's have the chat, let's talk about how hard it is. You know, we've talked about mummy wine time and the real parenting thing. You know, there was an article that came up actually this week on another group by, I don't want to mention the journalist's name and give her any publicity, but it was a dip into mummy wine time, but it ended up with her saying, well, if women weren't so busy, you know, if she wasn't so busy, maybe she wouldn't need the wine time. But it was very badly phrased. It was almost like, well, it blamed women. So not only do we have all of this pressure and all of the stuff that we're talking about today, not even just the workload of being a mom, the emotional side of it, but all this messaging and the societal thing we're talking about as well. It's like, you know, it's your fault if you feel like that, because you should know better. You should know better. You should be able to say no, to be all boundaried about it, and then you wouldn't need wine o'clock. And it was very, what's the word? Insidious messaging. Nasty.
Yeah, because it's essentially, it's like, you know, and that's the difficulty, because you get it on both sides, and this is definitely not just a female conversation. I think it's even worse for men. You know, that toxic masculinity sense. It's like, you know, if you say you're struggling, you know, so from a woman's perspective, you say you're struggling, it's like you're letting down the sisterhood, because we've got to like fight the patriarchy and, you know, change things and show that we are strong. And then you've got it from the other side of like, well, you're not, we told you couldn't do it all, kind of thing. So it's very difficult to own that things are hard, you know, and for men, you know, I mean, I'm not a man, so I can't speak but from an outside point of view, you know, that the fact that if they are struggling, you know, they are, you know, it goes against everything they've been taught about how they're supposed to be. So they're not even, there's no even like recognition of like, oh well, you know, that's you being a woman, you know, it's like that's not how you should be as a man. So it's incredibly toxic.
There was it, just going back to that book, The Body Is Not an Apology, she came up with a really good quote in that about men and within the system. And it was something like, we expect them to be these just kind of, it's almost like cardboard cutout men, like two-dimensional kind of fit coping people who can have a little bit of sensitivity but not too much, you know. And it was just so well put. But it's almost like we expect them to be, there's some not fully fleshed out or something, you know, there's no nuances allowed with men at all.
Otherwise it's seen as weakness.
And anyway, that's a whole other conversation, right?
And you know, and I I guess it's that, just what's the summing up of it all is just you know, that you can never know what's going on in someone's life, you know, when you walk down the street. And you know, I guess because we're coaches, because we work with people, because we have a community, we hear it, you know, all the time, of that like, well, you know, they have it worse than me, you know, and that's so, I shouldn't be feeling like this because XXX. And that's just the non-acknowledgement of your emotional pain, or that the things are difficult, you know, is not going to help you to create a life you love without alcohol. Because being able to, you know, recognize the hard times, and you know, just give yourself a break.
And I think
step one, isn't it, really?
100%. For me, it's like that support, community, connection, to know that you're not alone, to say it's absolutely okay to struggle, and that, it would be kind of weird if you weren't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, we can say that, we can say that.
And that doesn't mean life shit, right?
No, it doesn't mean life shit. It can change day to day. We go through cycles, don't we? Go through life cycles, and we have life impacts. We can, like you say, me in bed last week, unable to function, you like on Monday, then it's like light and shade. It's the nuances. It's just, I think as soon as we are able to hear each other, as soon as we're able to have an actual conversation, as soon as we're able to put faces to things and to hear people's stories, then we get the nuances, we get the rich sort of tapestry of it. And it's not so frightening as well, because we're like, okay, they're having a really awful day, they're having a crisis, but they're still human. They're not this kind of scary person that's like, not that's so other, there's a humanity and a connection there. Which leads me on to, can I say something actually that's just that before I forget, which I think is awesome, which I've heard about this week, in terms of, I suppose, having gatekeeping, keeping positive on our little spheres as mental health gatekeeping, and also this idea of hearing other people's stories, connection, to minimize or to lessen the fear of that, and to feel like we're human, because part of this, I think, is just allowing us to feel human, to be seen, to be connected with, in all of that, the glory and the shit of it, sort of thing. And it is what's it called? It's called the Human Library in Copenhagen. And what you can do is you can go on, and it's like you can read people like books. So you log on and there will be someone telling a story about themselves from all over the world. So it's like you can actually, it is like just reading humans like books, which I love that idea. So I did a little bit of digging. I haven't done any of it yet. Obviously, I'm just saying it's really good. But it sounds amazing. So that's what I'm going to be doing, a little bit of digging into this week. But I love that idea. And especially also in terms of, maybe learning difficulties or preferences. Maybe you don't want to read someone's biography, and I know you can do audio stuff, but I thought that was a really lovely way of also seeing lots of real people as well. It's not just celebrities or people who are worth, having a publisher say your book's worth something. It's properly democratic, isn't it? I love it.
And I think you learn so much from that, and it's that common humanity, isn't it? It's from top to bottom, left to right. It's like we're all humans, and that can be really healing. Which is why, we have peer support groups, meetings in our Love Sober group, and if you're listening to this, and if you're in our group and you don't go because you're scared,
don't be scared.
But sitting in a room with like-minded, a Zoom room with like-minded people, and just hearing other people's experiences with something that you struggle with is so incredibly powerful. So, oh my goodness, there's the most amazing bird outside. It's that one it's
quite colourful, isn't it?
Sorry, distraction. I have to put it on Instagram or something, so people are like, what is the bird? I just really hope my dog's not out there.
Shall I tell you what's outside my window? So if I look out in my window, it's basically a bit like parenting. It's a bit like when you go, oh God, I've tried to control them, and I'm just
going to
talk
up about
now.
The chicken now?
Well, I've not only got the chickens that are out in the garden, but I've also, the guinea pigs kept escaping. So now they just run around the lawn, and at night we put a bit of lettuce in their house and they go home. And so it literally looks like a mini kind of Jurassic Park, because all the chickens and the guinea pigs all hang out together like in a little pack. It's so weird. I'll have to take a photo, put it on Instagram as well.
There we go.
Oh my God.
Anyway. So let's leave it there, I think. look out on Instagram and around over the next week or so, because we will be spamming you with pictures of Miami, because both Kate and I are going to Miami for the She Recovers conference. So we will, we'll feed back on that afterwards. But we're super excited and
Can't believe it.
Feel grateful, and also just like be nice to see each other, right?
Yeah. It's going to be really surreal.
I know.
So brilliant.
But I think we've both agreed that the thing we're most excited about is individually being on a plane on our own for whatever it is, 8 hours, So like, I really apologize, but if anyone is coming from Paris on such and such flight, I will not be speaking to you. I just want to watch movies and like eat plain food and
no, it's amazing what's and I feel like I said, I'm a member of a CoCo Women group. But I do need to give them a shout out, because one of the events, so obviously they're not an alcohol-free one, but the events that came up today was an alternative cheese and wine tasting, and it's vegan cheese and alcohol-free wine, and I was like, that is amazing for a group of female entrepreneurs. Would not have happened 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago, and I just think it just shows how things are changing and opening up. And again, if you're listening to it and still in that sort of sober curious thing where you're like, but I don't know what life will look like without it, check your algorithms, because actually there's so much on offer now and so many ways to connect. So have hope and know that people are enjoying themselves and having and it's like that club soda thing, like with this room on the table for all of us. It can be normal not to drink, and it can be respected, celebrated. It might not even be a thing, all of that. It's not that kind of social death sentence that we thought it was going to be, nice.
All right then. So tip of the day, reason to love being sober.
Tip of the day. I think, tip of the day is to, it came up on the Life School alumni call on Monday, and one of our lovely women said that it was a mantra, how can I let this be easy? And I think going back to that is something all the time that I need to constantly check. I'm getting better, actually. I do feel like it's that muscle power habit change thing that getting so much better at recognizing the early signals of overwhelm and dialing down and taking, advocating for those needs, or, just even communicating about stuff if it's getting overwhelming. So, asking yourself, how can I just let this be easy? How can I let being sober today be easy for me? And then that might be that you need to take something off the list, or you need to opt out of something, or just that you need to have a bit of a treat. But how can you let being sober be easy today?
Nice. Can that be the tip for two of us?
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine.
Good.
And my reason to love sober is it's like my mind is being blown by being human at the moment. Like, I just find it so freaking interesting, all the layers. And like I was talking about, don't bloody get me started, Mandy. I'm very interested. Like, I have always been a sociologist, right, at heart, and obviously at uni. But I'm very interested in that kind of looking at building societies that are connected up and joining the dots between the old and the young and that community stuff. And I think it's just that ability for my mind to be agile and to dance with things that I'm interested in. Like, I think I felt like that had to be, I don't know, if I did one thing, I couldn't do another thing. And if I did that, then I certainly didn't have the mental, like the energy to flit about and absorb information. And then, I don't know, just, so it's that really. It's the power of the mind and being human. Once you get rid of the toxic shit of alcohol out of your life, out of your system. Yeah. But you.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, isn't it? It would come round to the opposite. Productivity. Even though we should be getting away from productivity, but shit, man, I'm so much more productive since I got sober. But yeah, in a meaningful way, it's that kind of like getting off the treadmill of just doing life, you know. So you look back, it's just like day in, day out, it's just like go, right, without any kind of reflection. I suppose it's reflection, self-reflection, and you know, that being part of your toolkit, because you have to be like, oh wow, like stuff was easier today because I didn't drink, or wow, I noticed that, because that helps you stay sober and it becomes a practice. But then that becomes part of something that you seek out to reflect on things, and that impacts, you know, your relationships, that impacts your work, because you become more intentional, you know.
Being sober is a superpower.
It is.
It's a superpower, whatever you do with it, whether you use it to help yourself reflect or to rest or to be productive. It just gives you power. It just gives you power, personal power, 100%. It's like it's the most empowering thing you can do.
And on that note,
okay, well, the lecture is over. Thank you for attending the lecture today, and we will see you in the Mandy and Kate universe of blah 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 next week. Stay safe. No, do stay safe and reach out if you've got any immediate concerns about your drinking. Lots of love. You know where to find us, and we'll see you next week for more chat.